All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving into a real-life historical thriller. We're talking about the founding of ancient India's most sprawling empire. Forget the dusty artifacts and boring dates. This is a story of vengeance, brilliant strategy, and shifting destinies. It's one of those tales that proves reality is actually way more cinematic than fiction.
So picture this. On one side, you have literally the most ruthless, heavily armed dynasty of the era, and on the other, a deeply insulted scholar and a fiery boy who'd been sold into slavery. You really have to ask yourself, how did two people, starting with absolutely nothing but sheer willpower, manage to completely upend the world order? Let's find out.
Okay, let's dive into this. To understand this incredible rise, we really need to look at the chaotic world they were living in. It's 323 BC. Alexander the Great's devastating march through the northwest has ended, but his generals are still looming right at the borders. Meanwhile, inside India, the land is completely fractured into smaller, vulnerable states. But here's the thing, the biggest immediate threat isn't just the Greeks to the west, it's the rot from within. The east is dominated by the Nanda Empire. It's a regime that is insanely wealthy, but widely hated for its cruel taxation and oppressive rulers.
Just look at the sheer, terrifying scale of the Nanda Dynasty's army under the arrogant King Thenanund. 200,000 foot soldiers, 80,000 cavalry, and get this, 6,000 war elephants. To put that into perspective, this force was so massive that Alexander the Great's battle-hardened troops literally mutinied rather than face it. This is the impossible wall our protagonists have to scale. Thenanund is just sitting on his throne, completely blinded by the absolute invincibility of his wealth and his military machine.
So who actually takes on a force like that? Enter our first protagonist, Acharya Chanakya. Before he was an empire builder, he was a teacher at the great University of Takshashila. But Chanakya wasn't your average everyday scholar. He was a master of economics, political science, and really brutal, pragmatic statecraft. Crucially, he was a visionary. While other leaders were obsessed with their own tiny kingdoms, Chanakya looked at the fractured map of India and saw a vulnerable land that desperately needed to be united under one strong ruler to survive the coming foreign invasions. Driven by this grand vision, he does the unthinkable. He travels straight to the Nanda court to seek their help.
But his grand vision? Yeah, it's met with absolute scorn. Imagine this scene. Chanakya stands in the opulent court of Pataliputra, pleading for the defense of the nation. King Dhananand, who is totally drunk on power and his own arrogance, brutally humiliates the scholar. He mocks Chanakya's appearance, his poverty, his ideas. He looks down at this brilliant mind and essentially says, "You are nothing but a speck of dirt in my kingdom. If you cross my path, you will be washed away."
Dhananand made a catastrophic mistake that day. He insulted the one man who could engineer his downfall. Humiliated in front of the entire assembly, Chanakya unties his traditional Brahmin hair braid, and in a voice trembling with rage but grounded in absolute resolve, he takes an epic vow. He swears he will not tie his braid again until he has completely annihilated the Nanda dynasty and placed a worthy ruler on that very throne. In that singular explosive moment of vengeance, the seed of the Mauryan Empire is officially planted. But a mastermind needs an instrument, right? He needs a weapon.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how perfectly these two historical figures complement each other. We have Chanakya on the left, the ultimate architect armed with intellect, education, and masterful statecraft. And on the right, we have Chandragupta, the raw material. He operates with intense physical resilience, raw, street-smart leadership, and sharp survival instincts. Let's look a little closer at who this boy really was because his background is crucial.
Chandragupta's story is one of profound tragedy, but also incredible defiance. He was actually born to a former queen of the Piplivan kingdom. After her kingdom was destroyed by the Nanda Empire, she was forced into grueling servitude. Chandragupta himself was sold off as a child, literally forced to wear the heavy chains of a slave. Yet, despite growing up in the dirt, performing menial tasks, and watching his mother suffer, his spirit was never broken. He harbored this burning desire, not just for his own freedom, but to free his mother and exact justice against the king who ruined his family.
And then, fate finally intervenes. Chanakya is roaming the land, desperately searching for a worthy leader to fulfill his vow, and he spots the young Chandragupta. He doesn't just see a kid playing a game of mock king. He sees a raw force of nature, someone, as he puts it, as powerful as a desert storm. Chanakya actually uses his own funds to buy the boy's freedom from his master. The scholar and the street kid are finally united, and the game is on.
But obviously, you don't just hand a sword to a teenager and tell him to go conquer an empire. Chanakya takes Chandragupta to Takshashila for years of grueling, rigorous training. Think of it like an intense montage of physical and mental forging. Chandragupta learns archery, swordsmanship, and cavalry. But more importantly, Chanakya teaches him economics, diplomacy, and the psychology of warfare. He instills in him this ultimate philosophy. True power requires discipline. And battles? They're always won in the mind long before the first sword is ever swung on the battlefield.
Let's move to the strategy and see how this builds. How does all this philosophy translate into an actual military campaign? Well, they don't have a massive standing army, so they start small. First, they build a grassroots rebellion, rallying local villages, farmers, and fierce forest tribes who are just desperate for a change in leadership. Second, instead of meeting the massive Nanda army head-on, which would be suicide, they use brilliant guerrilla warfare to sever supply lines, starving the larger army of resources. Finally, once the massive Nanda machine is weakened and distracted, they strike directly at the heart of the empire, the capital city of Pataliputra.
And this brilliantly illustrates how strategy can overcome sheer numbers. The Nanda army literally collapses from within, as soldiers, totally tired of Dhananand's cruelty, defect to Chandragupta's side. The arrogant king is utterly defeated. And in one of the most deeply satisfying moments in history, Acharya Chanakya, finally, after years of struggle, ties his hair braid. His vow is fulfilled. Chandragupta, the former enslaved boy, is crowned emperor, officially establishing the mighty Mauryan Empire. But hey, their work wasn't done yet.
They now had to secure their borders. Over in the west, Alexander's former general, Seleucus Nicator, is trying to reclaim Indian territories. So in 305 BC, Chandragupta's forces meet the Seleucid army and decisively crush them. But here is where Chandragupta shows his diplomatic brilliance. Instead of endless war, they sign a landmark treaty. The Mauryan Empire annexes vast territories stretching all the way into modern-day Afghanistan. In return, Seleucus gets 500 war elephants, which, fun fact, actually help him win wars back in the West, and the peace is sealed with a diplomatic marriage. India's borders are finally secure.
So, the crucial point here is that they weren't just conquerors, they were master administrators. Fast forward to the year 250 BC, under the continuing Mauryan legacy, their capital Pataliputra has become a breathtaking metropolis. We are talking about a mega-city stretching for miles, protected by massive wooden palisades, just teeming with foreign envoys, merchants, and a highly organized civil administration. It proves that the foundation Chanakya and Chandragupta laid wasn't just built on warfare, it was built on a really deep understanding of economics, justice, and societal order.
But what happens to a man whose entire life was defined by struggle, conquest, and power? Well, in a beautifully poetic end to his story, Emperor Chandragupta realizes the transient nature of worldly wealth. In his final years, the fierce warrior abdicates his absolute power, passing the throne to his son Bindusara. He completely renounces the material world, traveling south to embrace a life of peaceful Jain asceticism under the guidance of the monk Acharya Bhadrabahu, seeking ultimate spiritual liberation.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this profound takeaway from our historical sources. Great people are not born. They become great through their courage, actions, and determination. A humiliated scholar with nothing but a vision and an enslaved boy with nothing but chains came together to forge one of history's greatest empires. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What incredible potential is currently sitting dormant in the world today, just waiting for the right spark of determination? Keep that thought with you and keep questioning the history you think you know.